We've talked a lot about Amiga recently, we've talked about Windows too, so a natural progression for this one has got to be Sega Genesis, right? I'm Batman. What? Oh damn, you're right. Wrong video. I meant to say DOS, it's DOS in this one. 3D Space Fighter is a very late DOS shareware vertically scrolling shoot-'em-up. Shareware version of the game limited the playtime to 5 minutes only, and while I understand the devs not wanting to give away a third or even a half of the game for free in the shareware model, as they used to in the first half of the 90s, 5 minutes is just not enough to try the game out thoroughly. 3D Space Fighter takes place more or less today, and I mean it quite literally, as according to its story it's set in the beginning of the 21st century. We've been trying for so long, and we've finally managed to make contact with the alien species. Unfortunately, they're not what we were hoping that they would be. They're quite hostile and much more technologically advanced than we could ever hope to be. Naturally, realizing same thing we did, they attacked and single-handedly removed all our planetary defenses. Our destruction seemed inevitable. Seeing that, world governments did what until then seemed totally impossible, and they joined forces, pulled together in the last effort to create a craft capable of withstanding and counterattacking at the alien force. It was codenamed Sigma Terminus. As a tool of our last stand, the craft has been given to Earth's greatest pilot, the hero, the last hope. You're the one to pilot it against the alien scourge. 3D Space Fighter's gameplay is your typical shoot-'em-up, so you fly up fighting against advancing waves of enemies, attacking you in various patterns. They're quite different from one another and nicely designed, though personally I'm not a big fan of pre-rendered graphics. I prefer them to be either pixel-based sprites or entirely 3D. That's me though, so don't hold it against the game's quality. Every now and then spheres containing power-ups, shield refills and ammo for secondary weapons show up, and when destroyed, appropriate bonus drops or pickup. Each level ends with a boss fight, and these are, as per usual in shooters, more demanding and by extension of that, more fun encounters than the regular enemies are. You can get hit as many times as your shield can take, but it doesn't refill automatically without pickups. 3D Fighter's graphics are in high resolution as VGA and pre-rendered. While I don't care much for them personally, they look aesthetically pleasing if you don't mind them, and the sounds are pretty decent too, though nothing special. Overall, 3D Space Fighter is a pretty decent shooter that somehow managed to release under DOS in 1999, and not on Windows as most games did by then. A.G.E., also known as Advanced Galactic Empire, is a follow-up to earlier Galactic Empire and also a first-person space exploration game. And if on the first glance it seems to you similar to Elite, then good, cause it is, and offers a very comparable relative freedom of traversal. That said, A.G.E. features an overarching plot which, while not necessary to dive into straight away, also kinda gates access to some of the later gameplay concepts. So you'll have to be engaged with at some point whether you want to or not. And as plots in most games go, it's rather linear. But the space itself, its exploration and things you can do in are pretty open and fun. So as in most Elite-like games, you can fly around planets and stars, meet and converse with other characters and engage in space combat among others. Graphically, A.G.E. is rather attractive for 1991, and nice VGA vector graphics will be pleasing to most fans of the genre. Especially that accompanying sound effects fit well and the story encompasses the future of the whole universe. A.G.E. may not be as open-ended and infinitely replayable as Elite is, but it's a lot of fun nonetheless. Absolute Zero is a sci-fi space first-person shooter. Believe it or not, but by 24th century we've colonized a vast chunk of our solar system. The colonies may not be big, but they're self-sustainable, and while by then the space travel may have gotten considerably faster than it is now, and it's much more common, it's still not instantaneous. One of our colonies is on Europa, one of Jupiter's moons, and because of the abundance of water, it's one of the larger ones. One of the moon's mining facilities accidentally discovers long buried underground deep in slumber alien race. Uncovered species awoke as angry as your everyday Karen is and attacked the miners. Soon after, they destroyed Moon's capital city. Since potential help from Earth would take a while to arrive, it's up to you to stop the alien menace, or at least hold them off till said help shows up. The twist to the usual fare in similar games is that you don't play as a singular character, but are placed in control of a different one for each of the missions. And with their collective efforts piloting 7 different crafts and stationary combat installations, you will save the remnants of the colony and repel the aliens. I hope. Absolute Zero's story, and you having to play as different characters, constantly switching between them, is a very fresh take on the first-person space shooter genre, especially that it very accurately and convincingly portrays collective struggle for survival. It is not without its downsides though, and while the gameplay is really enjoyable when you get the hang of it, the entry threshold is quite high, as it's not instantly obvious what and how to do when you start the game if you've not read the manual before. So, either do it or prepare to practice for a while until you master the controls and user interface. As you play the game, the more and more of the story will be unveiled, and along with it, Alien's genesis and motivations, and if you persevere with it all the way to the end, all of it will culminate nicely. Absolute Zero is not a bad game, but it's not as straightforward jump in and play fair as Wing Commander for instance was, so it may be slightly discouraging to some. But if you like those story-rich space shooters, it's definitely worth giving it a chance. Airstrike is a side-view bi-horizontally scrolling shower shooter in which you control Apache-like helicopter. It's also a game that I like to think of as being a poor man's Jet Strike. It depicts a conflict between fictional North Atlantic Defense Alliance and equally as not real nation of Dosnovia. The game is divided into 21 chained missions which see you partake in peacekeeping activities. And if you wonder what that means, perhaps you're delivering food to the poor, building shelters for bombing victims and the likes, then no, that's totally not it. Peacekeeping in this particular case is a total and final destruction of all opposing enemy forces. So you're running said missions from the aircraft carrier stationed offshore from Dosnovia and giving very specific targets for each of them. The enemy forces consist of rocket launcher armed soldiers, AA guns, missile batteries, gunboats and others. And while killing them, it's best to make sure not to destroy any civilian structures or even trees, as destruction of these non-military objects adds up to a score penalty upon mission completion. Same goes for your copter. If it's damaged, it's worth some negative points. The map wraps around, and if you keep flying one way, you will end up back at the carrier. So I like to imagine that you're flying literally around the island. Otherwise, it makes no sense in my head and it bothers me a little. Airstrike's presentation is rather basic. The sounds are very muffled and don't give pleasant feedback to the on-screen action. The music is virtually non-existent and the graphics are disappointing when it comes to both their quality and animation. And I get that only few people worked on Airstrike, and that's hardly enough, but I would still expect much more by 1995. If you don't have Jet Strike and feel like some side-view helicopter action, Airstrike can be fun for a few missions. I wouldn't expect you to complete it though. Ajax, also known as Typhoon, is a rather average vertically scrolling shoot-em-up based on arcade original of the same name. Guess what is the background story of Ajax? No really, guess. Give it a go. Don't be shy. I'll wait. Did you said aliens invaded Earth again? You did? Great, cause that's what happened. I mean, it's not great cause it happened, but great cause you got it right. And I have the feeling that this third game covering the subject today is not the last. But we'll see. When I record it, it's not necessary when all games are picked for the video yet, so let's see if the past me managed in his own present to pick the game that will not surprise me by being thematically identical to the earlier three in this video and also his now future. I know, you're probably confused now, but imagine being me and living with all those thoughts constantly popping up in your head all day every day. It's as weird feeling as it is tiresome. On the upside though, I hardly ever get bored. Anyway, your objective is that simple, to complete all 8 levels and kill as many of the evil aliens as you can, preferably surviving in the process. You control a copter, again, armed with a cannon and a bomb launcher, and you also have a limited supply of smart bombs, used for clearing large clusters of enemies. And these naturally come at you in predefined and permanent between the playthrough's patterns. So, Ajax is one of those games where memorization is a key to success. Especially that you will be constantly under fire from both air and ground enemies, and your copter can't really take any serious beating. While arcade original of Ajax was really fun, impressive looking for the time it released, and one of the best shooters out there, this 1989's PC port is seriously let down by its graphics, which in A.G.E presentation, and not a good A.G.E I must add, makes it look bland and run disappointingly choppy. It's not a bad game, don't get me wrong, but it's an average one at best, at least on PC. Alpha Storm is a game that's hard to classify, as on the surface it appears to be just your run-of-the-mill FPS, but it's so much more than that. It's also a spaceship simulation set in a semi-sandbox universe. Basically a Star Trek if all was not good in the universe. And the game is divided into sections. First is your space traversal, for which you use your ship that can be equipped with various devices and weapon systems. This can be all sorts of lasers, engines, cloaking devices, radars or even radar jammers among others, and all these come in different class variants, so there's a lot here to work towards and change during the course of your adventure. The second section of the game is the first-person shooting, which happens on planetary bases or whenever you take the enemy's ship or space station's shields, teleport to them and want to clear them of the enemy forces. Or if you're unlucky, if they board your ship, cause that can happen too. When boarding enemy vessels, you can find and steal various pieces of hardware that then can be used on your ship. You know, how you would do in space if no laws applies to you, or if you elected to ignore them. The universe of Alpha Storm is rather large, several dozens of systems in size actually, and they can all be visited. They're not empty, as you would expect them to be as compared to our solar system, but populated by three factions: the Imperials, the Pirates, and the Vargs. Sadly, for whatever the reason, all of them are hostile against you, so joining any of the factions is out of question, which is a bit sad and limiting role-playing wise, but not a game breaker. Now, I mentioned that your ship can be boarded too, and same as you can steal components from the enemy ships, they can steal those from yours too. Even more so, some of the ship's systems can be damaged during combat and will need to be replaced. So keeping your aircraft in tip-top form is a must all throughout the game. While the gameplay is quite fun and unique compared to all the other titles that released in the same time, the story is... oh my. So, I don't know. It's bad and illogical, but not so bad that it's good. It's basically just stupid and inconsistent. The evil race of aliens came and wants to eradicate all life in the galaxy, leaving nothing but empty voids where star systems that they attacked were. So, you're trying to stop them, and to do so, you need to find two artifacts: Nova Bomb and Stasis Device. And at the same time, while you're seemingly doing it all for good, to save the world and all, you annihilate all the other species that you come across. So, perhaps it's you who's the scourge of the universe? In the end, Alpha Storm is fun if you play it for what it is and not focus on the story too much. Annihilator Tank is a shareware tank-based 3D action shooter. The game is your near-typical wave shooter, meaning that each consecutive wave of enemy tanks that you fight against is in greater and greater numbers, until eventually you finally get to the so-called Combat Unlimited level, where the number of enemies is infinite and you fight to stay alive for as long as you can, and not to complete it per se. You locate the enemies using the radar, compass and status bar, and other than that, there's not much that you need to know about the game. There are some obstacles like trees and such, but all are distractible, so provide no realistic cover. In short, kill as many enemy tanks as you can, survive for as long, and earn the points. There's 4 stages in the game: Country Carnage, Wasteland Warriors, Desert Destruction, and earlier mentioned Combat Unlimited, but only the first is available in the unregistered shareware version. Presentation-wise, there's really not much to Annihilator Tank. Sounds are appropriate, can't complain about them really, even if there isn't many more than the shot and explosion, and music is non-existent. Graphics are beyond basic and seriously disappointing for 1995, even if they're 3D. It's early 3D though, so it didn't age very well. In the end, Annihilator Tank is not a game to play for hours on end, but if you consider it a fun, simple arcade shooter to use as a palette cleaner between other better games, then it does its job very well. Apocalypse Abyss, a weird title really, is a top-down action puzzler. All the inhabitants of the magical kingdom of Ruidia disappeared seemingly into a thin air. In reality, they were captured and imprisoned by the evil wizard Nietzsche in his fortress in the Blood Mountains. Now, that's a cool name if I ever saw one. The fortress is impenetrable by the traditional means and can only be entered when the magic sealing it is broken. And to do so, 5 artifacts scattered around its dungeons need to be recovered. And you, playing as Ashtar the Dwarf, are the only one left, and by extension of that, the only one who can collect the artifacts, unlock the fortress, solve Wizard's ultimate puzzles, rid the world of him, and finally save all of the kingdom's inhabitants. Each of the levels is a puzzle that requires you to complete one objective, and one objective alone. Open the exit to the next and go through it. But it's never as straightforward as it sounds, and you will have to do a lot of tinkering around the various mechanics of the stages by pushing rocks, destroying barriers with bombs, and triggering objects with thrown daggers. A nice change, I must add, from all the deaths that are usually triggered with thrown daggers that we've seen in other games. The game is divided into 5 basic dungeons of 10 levels each, and each of the 5 contains one of the 5 mystical artifacts that need to be found and collected. And when you get them all, the last and final dungeon unlocks, and it leads to Evil Wizard's destruction when completed. Apocalypse Abyss, once again odd title, is a pretty fun game if you happen to like puzzlers, cause the level layouts and mechanics are varied enough to easily entertain you and that brain of yours all the way to the end. But if you don't care for puzzling, it will be annoying and awfully looking game for you, so just skip it, cause the graphics are really simple and unimpressive. Sure, it's not important in a puzzler, but if you compare it to earlier games like Pushover, One Step Beyond, or even Fury of the Fairies, which arguably is a puzzle platformer and not a straight-up puzzler, then Apocalypse Abyss looks like something that was not given a lot of attention. And even if it's not the case whatsoever, it's just not as good as the giants of the genre are. Brahmins, so the two-headed cows found in the Fallout's universe, is what I consider to be Apocalypse cows. They came to be as this terrible and awful looking spawn of evolution and radiation combined over time. In our today's game, it's hardly the case. Apocalypse Cow is a shareware split-screen top-down two-player only arcade title, and all the cows have just one head. A serious overlooking on the developer's side in my books, but whatever. The aim of the game is to destroy all the opponent's catapults before he does the same to you. And you do it by, you guessed it right, catapulting cows at them. The Apocalypse Cows. There are 3 types of these: a regular cow, you know, like the one in Milka commercials, but not purple. Then there is a glass one that destroys 2 catapults at one go, and the last, metal, destroys 3. Other than the cows, there are also other ways you can lose a catapult. And it's by either driving into a cactus, fire, or rabid dogs. Or by being burned by Mr. Sun. I know, sounds silly, but you'll know what I'm talking about when you see him. Or it, really, and not him. And finally, by being eaten by the hungry weasel head. Yep, I know, all I set up to this point seems crazy, to put it mildly, but that's the shareware games for you. You never know what to expect, and it can as easily be a gem as it can be a stinker. And Apocalypse Cow is, well, hard to tell. If you have a friend with you and some drinks were involved, then pretty fun for a little while. If not, then I don't know, try it out for yourself, man, and let me know. Anyway, all these NPC enemies, other than your opponent, appear on the screen after 3 minutes of playing if no winner is decided by then. You can however extend the timer by additional 15 seconds every time you manage to hit your cow in the green target on the opponent's side. Hitting a red one will upgrade their cow to either glass or metal, so best not to do it. If 2 cows collide mid-air, a cowboxing minigame is triggered and they fight it out on a cloud. I know, once again, I know it sounds crazy, but bear with me. The losing cow is removed and the winner carries on to its target. There are 4 differently looking stages in the game, and if all I said up to this point seems to you to be very Monty Python-esque, then good, cause it kinda is, just not in as smart as their sketches kind of way, more in an abstract, let's add more weird shit to our game way. Which is not bad either, just requires drinks I mentioned before. Non-alcoholic ones, obviously you drink to stay hydrated after all, right? Right. And I didn't say it all for the YouTube's sake. Asterix Caesar's Challenge is a multiplayer board game based on the cult classic European comic book series about courageous Gauls and their struggle against the Roman forces. Or rather, huge Roman armies struggles against a tiny village of Gauls, I should say, really. The game is all about traveling around the board that represents the Roman Empire and learning about the history and culture of various countries. Your goal is to collect souvenirs from all places you visited and then come back to your village in a given time with them as a proof of your accomplishments. Or otherwise, Caesar will win. Whatever that means other than the game over for you. The game board is composed out of 54 fields that you can land on, and they represent different countries, various challenges in form of the minigames, prisons, magic potions, traps, rest and meeting different lore-based characters. To acquire items needed for winning the game, you either have to answer correctly quiz questions asked in the country fields or purchase them from a Phoenician merchant for gold one in various mostly arcade-like minigames. Asterix Caesar's Challenge is a truly excellent party/family game that will no doubt appeal to all the fans of the comic books. Especially that you can obviously play as both Asterix and Obelix, the main protagonists of the series, and a few other well-known characters from the books too. Now, naturally, the replayability of the game is rather limited, as after a few complete playthroughs, you'll know pretty much most of what it has to offer. But if there are kids at home and you'd like them to both have fun and also learn something, anything, then it's an excellent pick to fire up. Provided you manage to have them stop watching TikTok, that is. And it's not that easy these days. Anyway, presentation-wise, Asterix Caesar's Challenge is incredible, and everything about it is top of the class for the year it released in. The sounds are nicely sampled, and the voice acting is high class. And the graphics? Don't get me started on the graphics. All the short animated clips and incredibly detailed drawings make it look as if you were watching an interactive cartoon most of the time. All in all, I cannot do anything else here than recommend Caesar's Challenge to anyone who's willing to try it out, as it's easily one of the best board games on PC in the 90s. We had quite a selection of really different games today, didn't we? But that's also what I like about this series, that you never know what we end up talking about. And sometimes, even I don't, as preparing the lists of games, then raw scripting and recording not necessarily happens in a logical order with me, cause I'm me. Anyway, if you liked any of these, found them interesting or otherwise, let me know in the comments below. If you liked the video, hit those like and subscribe buttons below. If you didn't, well, then there's thumbs down there too. But I suppose you wouldn't have persevered up to this point if you really didn't. Around 60% of you are not subscribed, and there's currently no way of knowing if YouTube will decide to recommend you the next episode or not, other than subscribing and hitting that bell, that is. And when you hit that bell, whenever the new video is out, YouTube will actually send you a small and friendly notification about it, so you wouldn't miss it. If you'd like to support the channel, Patreon and YouTube memberships are a great way of doing so. They will help me release better content, and also they get first dibs on all new videos before they're publicly accessible on YouTube. If you can't or don't want to do that though, likes and subscribes are great too. I would like to take a moment here and thank all the YouTube creators from whose videos short bits were taken to serve as a background to my commentary. They're amazing and stars among the retro community. You will find names of their channels at the top of the screen when their footage is running and also in the video description below. For me though, this is all, so have a good one and I'll see you next time. Peace.